Twitter special edition. Thank you for joining me, and let's get on with the show. We were supposed to be doing a political hitman on Israel News Talk Radio, but due to technical difficulties in Israel, they're in quarantine. Due to some technical difficulties there, we were not able to do the show tonight. So I figured I'm in studio anyway. Let's get on to Facebook and Twitter and to YouTube, and let's do a show for the Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook crowd. So I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank you for joining me, and I want to invite you, if you want, to call in. The numbers to call, 1-877-669-1292. That's the number to call, 1-877-669-1292. That's 1-877-669-1292. There's a lot of things I want to talk about, and I had prepared a show for Israel News Talk Radio. Unfortunately, they had a problem putting me on the air tonight. So there's a lot of things I want to talk about, and one of the main things that I know we're all in isolation. We're all getting fed up sitting at home. I'm not so gung ho about sitting at home. I'm a pretty social person. I like being out, so I'm not so gung ho about being at home. But this is what life is. Sometimes life throws things at you that you have no choice, and in this case, we have no choice. We must sit at home, and so here we are, sitting and thinking and working and trying to make sense of life. This is what we're trying to do. Now, will it work? I don't know. I've learned a lot of things over the time. I've learned a lot of things over the last week that I didn't know, mostly about humanity. So let's talk about humanity, because I think it's important that we talk about humanity. There's been good and there's been really bad when it comes to humanity and the coronavirus. There's been some pretty horrific stuff that's been done, and there's some stuff that's not so bad, and there's some stuff that's been really good. So, do we start with the good? Do we start with the bad? This is always the problem I run into when I try to figure out: do I want to start with the good? Do I want to start with the bad? Do I want to talk about things that happened that are relatively okay? So let's talk about the good. We'll talk about the good first. So the good, I've noticed there's a lot of humanitarians out there, a lot of people who have gone out of their way to help older people, to help people who are homebound, but are homebound not because they're being quarantined, but are homebound because they are because they're old, or they have physical problems, or they have something wrong and they have to be homebound. So I want to commend all the people around the world, and this has happened everywhere. I want to commend all the people around the world who have taken their time to go out and help people, who have taken their time to go out and try to make this a little more bearable for some of the people who have who are a little less fortunate than we are. I want to commend the people who have taken the time to pick up the phone and call people they normally wouldn't call, who have taken the time to try to make this a little more palatable for children who have been displaced and who are probably, in a lot of cases, very scared, who have made it a little easier for people who have lost loved ones or have loved ones suffering from this terrible, terrible virus. I want to commend all the people who have put themselves out to try to help others. This is what the world is about. This is what we are about. This is why we exist. And to get out there and to help people, to get out there and to try to make life a little easier for those who are suffering is what we should be striving to do. But alas, there is the other side too. And the other side rears its ugly head anytime a crisis comes up. The other side rears its ugly head. And its ugly head has reared quite a few times this week. And it bothers me. It bothers me a lot. So let's talk about let's talk about the ugly head rearing. There are people who exist in this world to complain and to complain and to find a fault in everything. Some people say that I'm one of those people because I do this show, and when I do this show, sometimes I point out faults in people and point out faults in the system, and I do that a lot. But there are a lot of people out there who just try to find any reason to bash people, to put people down. So in the circles that I hang out in online, in the circles I hang out in on Facebook and on Twitter and on Instagram and on Snapchat and all the other various communication tools that I use in order to talk to my fans and friends, I have seen a lot of people bashing religious people, religious Jews in particular. I see this a lot when crisis happens. We try to find a scapegoat, and it always turns out to be the religious Jew. It always turns out to be the Jew in the hat, the Jew with the beard. That seems to be the go-to people when it comes to religious scapegoating. And this is no different. This is no different. The coronavirus has not changed that trend, unfortunately. And in the city that I live in Montreal, finger pointing has been pretty blatant when it comes to people blaming others for the spread of coronavirus, and people blaming religious people for the spread of coronavirus. Last week, as the city was shutting things down and asking people to go into quarantine and asking people to relax, they decided that there were a few people who decided to have weddings. So they went out to have weddings. Now, unfortunately, weddings in this crisis perpetuates the spread of this kind of disease. So a lot of times when people make these choices, and weddings are planned way in advance. So a lot of the times when people make these choices, they didn't know that this coronavirus was going to happen. And so the weddings that I know of, the weddings that I was following, the weddings that I know of, decided that they were going to cut back on the amount of people invited to the weddings, and follow the government recommendations at the time, whatever time period there was. The government had recommendations on the time, on how many people could gather at any given time. Now, those recommendations kept changing throughout the course of time. Over the course of a few days, those recommendations kept changing. But at the time, there was a recommendation that, at least for the first wedding that I happened to have been at, I wasn't there as a guest, I was there as an employee, and I wasn't anywhere near the guests. But those recommendations at the time of that wedding was that you couldn't have more than 250 people in a room at the same time. Okay, fine. No more than 250 people in the room. And the wedding that I was at that particular time had 175 or 200 people. It was well below the government recommendation, and they took every precaution possible. They handed out hand sanitizers to all their guests. They handed out gloves to all their guests. The wait staff wore gloves and masks. It was really, they took a lot of effort to try to stem the spread of this disease. Yet they got roasted online by people who are just Jew haters. There were two other weddings that I didn't attend. One of them was held at a synagogue where the disease was spread. I guess they weren't as careful as the other people, and the disease was spread. And the banquet hall of the synagogue that this was held in is owned by a caterer. But that didn't stop the Jew haters from pointing fingers at the rabbi and at the congregants of the synagogue, who they blamed. They said, the synagogue is responsible for the spread of the disease, and religious people are responsible for the spread of this disease. It happened in Brooklyn, too. It happened all over the world, that the Jews were being scapegoated for the spreading corona. Now, nobody talked about the people from Florida, the people who fly down to Florida, the snowbirds who fly down to Florida and come back and just were living their life of Riley as if nothing was going on. Nobody talked about Nobody talked about other people who were defying the orders of the government to go and self isolate, and were running off and doing whatever they had to do, spreading the disease around too. But it was only the Jews. And every article I see posted on the internet, every article I see talking about people defying the rules of the isolations and the rules of the government, every one I see has a picture of a synagogue or a Jew in a black hat with a beard. If this doesn't perpetuate the hatred towards Jews, I don't know what does. And the worst part about it is, in the city that I live in, the people perpetuating this lie, the people perpetuating this myth, and the people pushing the envelope when it comes to blaming religious Jews are Jews themselves. This is the sad part. This is the sad part. We've come to the point where we're being self-destructive. Being self-destructive. For what reason? Why are we being self-destructive? Because we can. Because the idea of Jews hating Jews, which goes all the way back to the destruction of the Second Temple, has not changed. We still suffer from the same disease, and not corona, that we suffered from back then. Nothing has changed. And this is where it hurts. It hurts the heart to know that this is what's happening. And you can't do much about it. I mean, perceptions are perceptions, and when people push these kind of perceptions, it's a big problem. Jews aren't spreading corona any more than anybody else are. Let's be clear. Orthodox Jews are not spreading corona any more than anybody else is. And if they get together for a minyan and they stand 10 feet apart from each other, they're not spreading corona any more than anybody else is. And if they go to a mikveh, which, by the way, was allowed, and the mikvahs are treated with chlorine, and they take all the precautions necessary, they're not spreading the disease more than anybody else. And those people who continuously point fingers at Jews in black hats are just Jew haters. And I hate to say it, but that's what they are. They're Jew haters. They're people looking for every excuse to blame a Jew for something. Now, you could be a Jewish Jew hater. I mean, that's possible. I mean, that's more often than not, that's the case. When Jew hatred comes up, it's usually a Jew who starts it or who's continuing it. Look at the BDS movement. And the people who, the people who violate the rules of the game should be condemned. I don't know if they should be publicly shamed like some people are trying to do, but condemned for sure. If they're intentionally spreading the virus, or unintentionally, but just doing it out of negligence, yes, they should be condemned and called out for it. But that doesn't mean everybody is guilty of it. And that doesn't mean that you could put out a general statement saying that the entire Hasidic community is guilty of spreading corona. Because that's ridiculous. And it's unacceptable. I had an argument on one of these Facebook groups. They were talking about weddings happening in different wedding halls, and they were particularly upset about a wedding that happened at a Lubavitch synagogue. And I kept telling them that the banquet hall in this Lubavitch synagogue is owned by a caterer, and the synagogue really has nothing to do with it, but nobody wanted to listen to me. And they kept bashing Lubavitch. They're giving out shmora matzahs. How dare them give out shmora matzahs before Pesach? They're putting on tefillin. How dare them put on tefillin? Everything that they did, nothing was good enough. No matter how good the deed was, or how bad the deed was, nothing was good enough for these people. They are responsible for putting our community in danger. Really? Really? Even though they didn't own the banquet hall that had the wedding? Just because it's in their building doesn't mean they own it. But nobody cared about that. And the same people who are bashing Chabad because their banquet hall, the banquet hall in their synagogue that's owned by a caterer, had a wedding after the restrictions were put into place. Nobody bashed the Italians. Their banquet hall had a wedding the same night. A Jewish religious wedding. Nobody bashed the Italians. Why are you so quick to bash the Jews, but not so quick to bash the Italians? Why is it good to point out Chabad and yell that Chabadniks are endangering the entire community, but nobody's yelling that the Italians were endangering the entire community because they had a wedding in their banquet hall? Why the hypocrisy? Why is it easy for Jews to point fingers at other Jews, but ignore other people who are doing the same thing? Maybe you could explain it to me. I don't understand it. I don't understand why Jews are always scapegoated by other Jews, and why it's always the religious community that's at fault for everything. Maybe you can explain it to me. 1-877-669-1292. It's 1-877-669-1292. That's the number to call if you want to try to explain this. I don't think there's an explanation, but if you want to give it a shot, you could give me a call at 1-877-669-1292. I can't think of an explanation on why it's always the Hasidic community that's being pointed out, always the Hasidic community that's being put on the Okay, let me back up just for a second, because I know somebody's going to call and say, listen, all right, let's back it up. Somebody's going to call me and say, or message me and say, hey, Howie, the Hasidic community, the Haredim in Israel. No, don't go there. Talk about the Hasidic community in North America. Talk about the Hasidic community in your city. The guys who run around and try to put tefillin on people so that they can have a mitzvah of putting on tefillin. The guys who run around and make sure that you have a mezuzah on your door. The guys who run around and give away shmura matzah at $17, $18, $19, and $23 a pound, so that you could have the mitzvah saying a bracha, a prayer, over proper matzah. The guys who run around collecting money for brides who maybe don't have enough money for a wedding. The guys who run around and collect food from caterers to give to poor people because they need it. Let's talk about those people. Let's not talk about the people who flaunt the laws and say I'm above the law, because that's a minority of the religious community. Why are the people who are doing good in our community being maligned? Why are they being raked over the coals? And why do we accept this as Jews? Why do we accept other Jews bashing Jews? We don't accept anyone else bashing Jews. Anytime anybody says something negative against the Jewish people, suddenly, everybody's yelling, anti-Semite, anti-Semite. But the second something like this happens, it's okay to go after the black hats. It's okay to go after the guys with beards and black hats. Well, I could do it. I'm Jewish. I can insult Jews. It's disgraceful. It's absolutely disgraceful. I don't understand how we could allow this to happen. 1-877-669-1292. Now, there are people who disregarded the warnings, and people who didn't pay attention to the virus and didn't take it very seriously. I know people who told me, "Hey, Howie, it's nothing to worry about. Why do we care about the virus?" Well, we care about the virus because it's contagious. That's why we care about it. I'm going to have to take a break. When we come back, we will continue. 1-877-669-1292. We'll be back right after this. And welcome back. Sorry about that. I have a dry throat. It's been plaguing me for weeks already. And before the virus started spreading, and it's not corona, I just have a dry throat. So if you see me coughing, it's just because of my dry throat. When I talk a lot, I tend to cough. Um, this has been happening for a few weeks. I think it's just a residue of a cold, but I'm pretty sure it's not corona disease. Absolutely not. It started before this whole corona threat started. It's been going on for a couple of weeks with me, so I'm not really all that worried about it. It's just annoying when I'm doing a show. 1-877-669-1292 is the number to call. That's 1-877-669-1292. It's the special edition of the Howie Silbiger Show. We are doing it. We are doing it on Facebook, Twitter, and well, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. That's right. It's Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We are not. This show is not being broadcast on True Talk Radio's app. It's just an online show, and it's a late night online show, which is kind of fun. Uh, so, let's move on. So the religious community has been maligned and has been beaten up over this coronavirus spread. Not only in Montreal where I live, but across North America. I've seen articles in the New York Post and the New York Times blaming the religious community. There have been a lot of prominent rabbis, a couple of prominent rabbis who have died from corona, and one or two of them who are on ventilators as we speak. May they have a speedy recovery. And this is a very serious disease, and we have to take it seriously. We cannot not take it seriously. Now, I heard people complaining that that they have to be quarantined, that you have to stay at home, that you have to be vigilant, and you have to wash your hands, and you have to take care of your kids. And people complaining about having their kids at home. Stop complaining. Stop complaining. The alternative is so much worse. So stop complaining. What are you complaining about? You have to have your kids at home? Oh, poor you. If you don't like kids, you shouldn't have had any. You have to wash your hands? Well, you should have been washing your hands anyway. What kind of people are we if we're not washing our hands and keeping our bodies clean? How are you still healthy if you don't wash your hands on a regular basis? Your hands and your face, hands touching your face, are the main way that germs get spread. You want to stay away from corona, you want to stay away from COVID-19, the best way to do that is with soap and water and washing your hands. That is the best way to do it. 100% the best way to do it. Right, so let's go back to the good because, we talked about the bad. Let's talk about the good again. I like to go back and forth because the good outweighs the bad in every case. There are synagogues across North America, and I'm on many of those mailing lists, who have offered their congregants many different things. Loans, interest-free loans. They've offered for Passover food. They've offered to buy Passover food for people who can't get out. They have offered to sell cooked Passover food for people who can't get out. It is amazing how the community has come together. And even the Hasidic community has come together under attack from the rest of the community. They've come together and they've tried to help out as much as possible. And you have to commend the people involved in this kind of thing. And the people who come up with the ideas on how to help other people. And the people who take the time to go out and do it. Inherently, we're all selfish. Myself included. I won't say I'm not as selfish as everybody else. I'm not as guilty as everybody else of not caring or of not doing something that should be done. I, of course, am as guilty as everybody else of being complacent and being lazy and not doing as much as I could possibly do. I readily admit it. And I am working to be a better person, as you should all be working to be better people. But at the same time, there are people who put themselves out 100%. Like, nobody's working now. The statistic was yesterday. Was it yesterday? I think it was, no, it was on Friday. Sorry. On Friday, the statistic was 1 billion people around the world had missed work on Friday, didn't go to work on Friday. 1 billion people, that's a lot of people who didn't go to work. So that's 1 billion people that are doing other things, like helping other people, like getting online and bashing religious people, like talking and like talking to each other online. Uh, I want to mention that there are companies that have put themselves out too. The company Zoom has donated their platform, their professional platform, to schools right around the world, so that children could continue schooling even when they're in quarantine. And you got to commend a company like Zoom for doing something like that. You have to commend companies. You have to recognize companies that go above and beyond. Companies that deliver groceries, even during the people who go to work to deliver groceries and to prepare groceries and to handle food, even though they're putting themselves at risk. But people have to eat. It's an essential service, and they are on the front lines for minimum wage. These people have to be commended. We have to say thank you to these people. People that a lot of people look down upon. I personally don't, because I've been in that position. I've worked in grocery stores not that long ago. So I understand the position these grocery store people are in. I understand how much abuse these people take on a regular basis, because I've been there. And when you've been there, you can understand it. I'm not just looking from the outside. I can look from the inside out. And I understand completely how much these people don't want to be there, and they want to be at home with their families. They want to be safe, and they don't want to be exposed to this disease. And yet they show up day after day to your local supermarket to restock shelves, to make sure that your food is there, so that you could go in and you could empty the shelves and make a huge mess so they could go and clean it up again. And then they go home with their paycheck, their minimum wage paycheck, and can't afford to buy 1/4 of your grocery order. I understand it. And I have to say that these people are heroes. And they deserve so much more than we give them. They deserve so much more thanks than we give them. They deserve so much more respect than they are given. And by Jove, they deserve so much more money than they are given. But they're considered the bottom of the food chain when it comes to corporate workers. It seems that in a lot of industries, the people on the front lines, the people who deal with your customers, the people who control your sound, the people who control the message, are treated like garbage. And grocery workers, I remember years ago, I'm a school teacher, and I was a journalist, and then I worked in grocery stores. I've done pretty much everything. And I remember years ago I was working part-time as a journalist for a prominent newspaper, and I was working in a grocery store. So I would do both. And I remember somebody coming up to me when I was wearing my journalism hat, not my grocery store hat. And I was in the grocery store shopping when he came up to me and he says to me, "Could you imagine working in a place like this? What kind of scum comes to work in a grocery store?" And we were standing in the department that I worked in the grocery store I worked in. I had just finished my shift, and I was going to cover a story for the newspaper. So I'd taken my smock off, and I put my jacket on, and I was heading out when somebody came up to me, not knowing who I was, that I worked in the store there, and said, "What kind of scum works in this grocery store? You know what kind of scum work in grocery stores?" And I looked at the guy and I said to him, "Why would you buy food at a grocery store if you thought the worker was a scum? I don't understand why would you go in there? Why would you want scum serving you food?" So where else would I buy food? And any store I go into that sells food, it's all scummy people who work there. It's all people bottom of the barrel, no education people who are stuck doing this kind of job. And I looked at him and I said to him, do you know that I work in this store?" And he looked at me and he had a shocked look on his face. "Really? You work in this store?" I was like, yeah, I work in this department that we're standing in here. I work in this department. And he says to me, "I don't believe you." I said to him, "Well, I don't care if you believe me or not. That's irrelevant. The fact is that I work here. He says, no, you write for a newspaper. I said, yeah, I do that too. I said, but I also have 2 university degrees. Yes, it's true. I am the scum you are talking about, very well-educated scum, who chooses to work here because I have to pay my bills. Lots of people are in my position where we do what we love to do. I'm doing this show. I love to do these shows. I make no money doing these shows. Nobody pays me to be here. In fact, it costs me money to do these shows. But I love doing these shows, and I don't mind spending the money. I don't mind spending the time to do this. But I need to do work that pays a salary. And so if I could find a job in a newspaper or at a radio station or at a television station, I take the job and I work there as long as I can. But when that job dries up, as it normally does, and when big corporations that own these media conglomerates that own the places decide that a guy in his 40s isn't really all that alluring, a guy in his 20s is more alluring because you can pay him half the price. A guy in the 40s with experience, you got to pay him a little more. A guy in the 20s, you can pay him almost nothing. And so when they realize they could do that, they get rid of the guys in their 40s then they take the guys in their 20s. So guys in their 40s with tons of experience end up like me, doing other things. That's fine. I don't mind. I've been a radio guy my whole life. I've been a media guy my whole life. I can't say radio my whole life. I've been doing radio for more than half my life. Before radio and during radio, I was a print journalist. I've never worked in television, but I was a print journalist and I was a radio guy. And a blogger, of course. Those of you who have seen my blog at howiesilbiger.com know that I'm a blogger. And a podcaster, if that's what you want to call it. We do a live show and then we podcast it afterwards, so I could also be called a podcaster. But I'm also a high school teacher. And I spend a lot of time teaching children and trying to teach them, well, aside from the subjects that I teach them, trying to instill some kind of moral value into these children too. Trying to let them understand the perspective that I come to life with. The perspective when I look at life, the way I look at life. Now, I don't look at life much differently than a lot of other people, that's for sure. There are a lot of moral people out there who look at life in the way that I look at life. That we have to be good people, that we have to try to help as much as we can, that we have to stand up and fight against evil. And this is what gets me into trouble the most. Standing up and fighting against evil, standing up and fighting for a cause. It gets me into trouble the most. I've lost jobs. I've lost paying jobs over shows that I have done standing up for a cause. Now, on this particular show, those of you who have watched for a long time or listened for a long time, on this particular show, you know that I stand up for Jewish values on this show, and I stand up for Judaism. And every show, or very often, I will get on here and I will fight for Israel, and I will fight for religious Jews, and I will fight for Jewish values, and I will fight for morality and family values. And that gets me into trouble a lot. And I've lost just recently. I lost a job just recently due to a blog piece I wrote or a Facebook post or something to that effect. This is what happens. People disagree with you, so they fire you. And you know what? I've learned over the years that I'm okay with that. I've decided over the years that I'm okay with that. If people are petty enough to fire you or to remove you from a position because you have a different political opinion than they do, I have no issues with that. It's petty, it's stupid, but we live in a petty, stupid world. We have allowed our world to be dumbed down to a point where political debate doesn't exist anymore. It has become my way or the highway. And so people who work together in an environment, no matter how competent you are at your job, if you make a political statement or you make a statement that somebody disagrees with, Suddenly, it doesn't matter how competent you are, you're out, you're gone. It's a sad state. It's really sad. It really is sad that we've come to this point. But this is where we're at. We're at a point in time where a government could pass laws banning people from wearing religious symbols because apparently a piece of cloth on my head, this little piece of cloth right here on my head, somehow proselytizes the children that I'm teaching grammar to, or teaching math to, or teaching science to, or teaching history to. Somehow that disqualifies me from being a professional teacher and teaching the subject that I'm assigned to teach. And nobody rioted in the streets. Nobody cared. I mean, it's not only me, anyone wearing a hijab or anything else. I mean, religious symbols. And nobody really cared. I mean, a couple of people went to court. There were no mass riots. There was no mass protests. There was just silence. While me and a whole bunch of other people suddenly had our careers dwindled down to nothing. Our chances of promotion, our chances of moving up, our chances of getting better salaries or better positions, gone. And nobody cared. One newspaper was busy fighting for the distribution of free flyers to your door. Didn't care about this topic at all. Another newspaper was cared about the topic. They wrote a couple of articles, then dropped it because things move on. Nobody really took up the baton. Nobody really fought. Nobody really rallied the crowds. And the human cost was people like me, people who wear hijabs, were left out in the cold with no advocates. The only advice I ever got when it came to wearing my yarmulke was from mostly my Jewish colleagues and friends who said, just take it off. If you take it off, you won't have a problem. Why would that have to be an option? Why would I have to take it off? Secularism, okay, fine. I have no issue with secularism. We live in the diaspora. We live in a secular society, so I have no issue with secularism. I have no issue with not promoting religion in a classroom environment. I would never have, and I don't intend to. I intend to teach the curriculum, and that's pretty much it. So secularism doesn't bother me. But what does my yarmulke have to do with secularism? What does my personal faith have to do with secularism? And it's funny, we've gone through 3 holidays since this law has been passed. I mean, this is the 3rd holiday coming up now. And the 2 holidays before this one were Hanukkah and Purim. And the Hanukkah holiday is about Jews who were told that they can't worship as Jews. They have to bow to idols and they have to bow to the king and everything else. And they fought back. And they said, no way. It's counter to Judaism. And Purim was the story of Jews fighting back against an edict to annihilate them. And the Jews said, no way. And Passover is a holiday of the Jews being held in slavery in Egypt and then saying, no way. And here we are, after this law passed. Jews telling me, just take off your yarmulke and you'll be okay. People have not learned the lessons of our holidays. They have not learned the true essence of what these holidays stand for. That Jews can't bow and give up on Judaism. That we have to keep our faith in God. We have to keep our faith and keep our traditions. They've tried to destroy us. For centuries, they've tried to destroy us. And for centuries, Jews stood up and said, no way. And we still exist today because of that. There was no way that the Jews could have won the Holocaust. No way at all. But here we are. And with that in mind, it infuriated me. It didn't just upset me, it infuriated me when my Jewish colleagues and friends told me, take off your yarmulke. You wanted to work as a teacher? Take it off. It was infuriating. And I said, no way. There's no way I am taking off my yarmulke. No way at all. If that requires, if the requirement of me taking off my yarmulke is for a job, I'm not going to do it. And I haven't. And so I'm working in Jewish schools. Right now I'm working at yeshiva. Maybe next season, next school year, I'll work in a regular Jewish high school. We'll see. If I can't work in public school, that's life. But I am not going to, and let me repeat that again, I am not going to back up on my Jewish values for a job. Ever. I am not going to stand down on my moral values for a job. Ever. And if I see an injustice, I will continue to point it out. If I see a problem, I will continue to point it out. Because that's what I do. And whoever doesn't like it, and I know there's a lot of people probably who don't like it, whoever doesn't like it could stuff it. That's the way I see the world. That's how I see it. Now, I could be wrong. And I know my mother always tells me I'm wrong. When you say stuff like that, you're wrong. But that's how I see the world. I am entitled to an opinion. And I don't pretend to do anything else but express my opinion. And I'm entitled to a point of view, and I'm entitled to a religious conviction. As a human being, I'm entitled to this. This is a basic human right. Now, if you don't agree with me, that's fine. That's why I have an open line. That's why you could call in any time at 1-877-669-1292. And if you disagree with me, you could type in a message into the message boxes on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook. If you disagree, you want to discuss this with me, I mean, there's so many ways to talk to me. You can send me a private message. So many different ways to talk to me. And to have this discussion, if you disagree with something I say. But I'm not going to not say it because it's going to get you upset. Because that would be jeopardizing my freedom of speech. But aside from jeopardizing my freedom of speech, that would be so wrong to not have a political debate because one side might get insulted or upset over the political point of view of the other side. What happened to political talk? What happened to normal debate? Where'd it go? What happened to it? When did we become a world of weak-spined people? When did we become a world of people who can't take the fact that other people may not agree with them? I've always had on this show, the show I've been doing for almost 30 years, 27 years now. I've always had, on the show, people of varying political point of views. The people that I've had on the show, I don't set up the conversations. We don't script them. Everything is unscripted on the show. The people I've had on the show have been like from radical left to moderate left. I've had everything on the show. As regulars on the show. Because I like having debate. I like talking to people. I like getting different perspectives and different points of view. This is what I like doing. Some of them have stayed on the show for years. A.B. Weisfeld was on the show for maybe 12 or 15 years. He was a regular contributor to the show. The only time I threw him off the show and we stopped talking to each other was after he sided with Hamas. So before that, we were fine. He was always up against Hamas. When Hamas started having those rallies on the border of Israel last summer, or 2 summers ago, and started lobbing bombs into Israel with balloons and whatever they were using to lob bombs into Israel, he sided with them. And once he sided with them, I think it was Hamas and Hezbollah at the time, once he sided with them, he couldn't be on the show anymore. Because there is a line, too. I won't promote people who side with the enemy, who side with people trying to kill my people. But, if somebody has a different political point of view, and they're not siding with terrorists, I have no problem at all having a conversation with them and having them on the show and having them as a regular on the show. I do it time and time again, yet I'm called a right-wing fascist. It's funny. It actually makes me laugh because the show is the most open show that you could find. Sure, here I am talking, but if you called in and you had a left-wing point of view and you want to talk about something with a totally opposing point of view that I have, I would not hang up on you. I've never hung up on people who have opposing point of views. In all 26 years of me doing this show, or variations of this show, on different platforms. So it amazes me. It amazes me when people shut other people down or shut other people off because they have a different political point of view. I'm always amazed by that. It always bothers me just a little bit that we can't have political conversation anymore, that there's an issue with having a discussion. Which brings me back to the fact that if you wanted to talk to me, you could give me a call at 1-877-669-1292. That's 1-877-669-1292. We're going to be on for another 10 minutes or so if you want to call in, now would be a good time. So this all brings us back to the circle of this corona disease and staying home with the corona disease. So I'm sitting at home, and when you're sitting at home, you have a lot of time to think, and you have a lot of time to plan and to evaluate things. And I'm sitting at home and I'm thinking about all this, about not having conversations anymore, about the fact that the religious community is constantly under attack and always scapegoated for anything that happens, the fact that the media is quick and extremely quick to ramp up a topic and rile up the entire world and get people all upset and scared and running out and buying millions of rolls of toilet paper. These things that come into my mind when I'm sitting and thinking, and I'm wondering. I'm always wondering why things happen, how things happen, and why things happen, and why the media does what they do. And I haven't come up with a conclusive answer yet, but I will get back to you when I do. I haven't come up with a conclusive answer why the media would want to rile up and scare the entire population. And they've been doing it for months about the coronavirus. So much so that the hoarders went out and bought up all the toilet paper around the world. Now, one second, I don't understand the concept of buying out the toilet paper for respiratory disease. That's kind of weird, but to each his own, right? But I just don't get it. And maybe someone could explain it to me. I mean, maybe you understand it, and I understand they were scared, and there's always the fear that the government's going to shut everything down, so we have to have enough supplies. And I get it. I get that. But I saw a guy at Costco with 800 rolls of toilet paper in his basket. 800 rolls of toilet paper. Now, I don't know about you. And I could only talk about myself. But it would take me multiple years to use up 800 rolls of toilet paper. Now, I don't know. Some people might have problems that require that amount of toilet paper. But he wasn't the only one there with that kind of toilet paper in his basket. So it just confuses me. All right, so that's it. We're done. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank you for taking part in this special show. We will do this again. I don't know, maybe on Thursday. I'm Howie Silbiger. This has been a special edition of the Howie Silbiger Show right here on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you again next time.